North Yorkshire.
And all the music you love. BBC Radio York.
We were talking last week on Breakfast about Marmite because apparently there was a shortage. One of the headlines on the front page of the papers was, oh no, there's a Marmite shortage. The other side of it said, oh great, there's a Marmite shortage. And that's really interesting, isn't it? Because the word Marmite has become a byword for things that you either like or dislike intensely. Now, I'm going to stick my neck out and say that what we're going to talk about over the next few minutes probably falls into that category, rightly or wrongly. And for many, many years, centuries even, people have been saying, how can we get around this? How can we make this more popular? And the this we're talking about is classical music. Well, there's one man who thinks he can do this. He's Robert Emery, and he's a conductor of all sorts of the big orchestras, including the London Philharmonic, the Royal Philharmonic, the National Symphony, the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic, amongst many, many others. He's got a new TV show out doing exactly this thing. He's trying to make classical music more accessible to everybody. Robert's with us on the line. Robert, good morning.
Good morning, Adam. And you're right, classical music is amazing. Have that Marmite and eat it.
What a job you've got. Why in 2021 are we still talking about why is classical music not popular?
Well, I think there's a real simple reason for that, and that's because, music evolves, and that's the right thing to do. And so we mustn't forget that in the day of Beethoven releasing his Fifth Symphony, that famous ba 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 ba, actually that was the kind of pop music of the day. That was the thing that people loved listening to and enjoyed. The idea of Kanye West or Taylor Swift or Queen or whatever your favorite is, wasn't around back then. And so music has evolved. It's actually just become an awful lot simpler over the years. We stick to the same sort of harmonies now. We had a drum beat on some guitars, and in general, it's just become a lot simpler than listening to an hour-long Mahler symphony. But it doesn't necessarily mean that hour-long Mahler symphony or a Rachmaninoff piano concerto or a Beethoven symphony or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that that's invalid anymore. It just means it's seen as more complicated, and tickets to go and see a symphony orchestra are expensive, so it becomes more elitist. And because running a symphony orchestra, putting 90 professionals on a stage and paying them to play music is an expensive thing, so it doesn't happen as much. But because it doesn't happen as much, it becomes even more expensive. And so now we're in this situation in 2021 where the only people, in inverted commas, who like classical music are the people who are wealthy and can afford to like it, or the people who have studied that type of music and therefore they've understood the educational value of it. But I'm here to shout from the rooftops to say it's all wrong. And classical music is around you every single day, and everybody loves it, whether they realize it or not. You can go and watch one of your most amazing films, and you've probably got classical music on in the background, creating an atmosphere for you. You wouldn't have Hans Zimmer or John Williams without Beethoven. You wouldn't even have Kanye West or Taylor Swift without Beethoven, because they are using the same chord structures that Beethoven used back in his day. So classical music is everywhere. It's amazing. It doesn't have to be complicated. And I'm here to shout out loud and proud.
I think you've hit the nail on the head through all that, because I think you've hit upon the cost element. I mean, I've got to say here and now that there is nothing quite like sitting in a concert hall and hearing a symphony orchestra play live. It is a magnificent experience, but it's expensive. You say it's elitist. There's this snobbish element still around. So how do you break down those barriers? Because yes, it's okay saying, Kanye West wouldn't be doing what he's doing if it hadn't been for Mozart and for Beethoven. But I used to run down to the record shop to buy Bohemian Rhapsody when it first came out. I used to go down with my pocket money and grab the single for 50 pence, however much it cost. I didn't go down to the record shop to go and buy Beethoven Symphony No. 3. So What can you do to break down those barriers, and how are we going to bring those costs down to make it accessible to as many people as possible?
Fine. Well, first of all, where you are, you've got the beautiful York Minster. You can go in there every single day in normal situation and hear the choir sing. It doesn't cost you a single penny. It's beautiful. It's free of charge. You can go and hear a service, whether you're religious or not, and hear this amazing music coming from a beautiful choir. If you are, ever in London, you can get tickets for a tenner at most of the symphony halls there, the Royal Festival Hall, the Royal Albert Hall, or the Barbican, or somewhere like that. They do sell tickets for tenner, so you can go in for a tenner and enjoy it. Or you can do what I'm hoping you'll do right now, is go onto YouTube and search for the word Classical Connections, and you'll see the new series that I've got. And it's trying to break down these barriers. It's trying to say that classical music can be for everybody and it can be fun. And the thing that people got to understand is these composers, they led incredible lives. I mean, bonkers lives. The first episode in Classical Connections is by a composer called Grieg. Now, if you went down to Bob on your high street and said, "Bob, do you know a composer called Grieg?" he'd probably say no. But if you went, "Do you know this?" Bob, 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 yeah, da, da, yeah, da, da. Oh, yeah, that's the Alton Towers theme tune. Yes,
right. I was about to challenge you there before you mentioned Alton Towers, because I was about to say no, he wouldn't know that. But then, of course, yes, he would, thanks to the power of TV advertising.
Yeah, exactly. So he would know that, and he'd probably enjoy listening to it. And you don't need to tell him that it's written by a composer called Grieg. But the interesting thing about this composer called Grieg is that he was a bit of a nutter, and he was very superstitious, and he kept a green plastic frog in his pocket at all times. And the idea with Classical Connections is to find out these random stories. So, for instance, there's a guy called Berlioz. Now, he's a composer that most people in the general world have probably not heard of, but if you listen to some of the music, you would recognize it. But Berlioz was a hopeless man. He was utterly in love with this girl called Marie. And he asked Marie to marry him. And Marie said, "Well, I could have asked my mum." So she asked the mum, and Mum said, "Yeah, of course you can marry my precious daughter if you win this really important composition prize, which will make you the star of Europe." It took him 4 attempts to win this prize, and finally he won it. He went back to Marie and said, "Will you marry me, Marie?" And she said, "I'm so sorry, Hector Berlioz. No, I can't marry you because you were too slow in winning your composition prize. I'm married to somebody else." And he was so upset with this that he got on a train. He bought a French maid's outfit, and he concocted this amazing ruse to go into the house of Marie as dressed as a French maid so he wouldn't be recognized, and he was going to shoot Marie. And he was going to shoot Marie's new husband, and he was going to shoot the mother, and finally he was going to do the dastardly deed on himself. And this is a dead true story. He got off the train near the seaside because he had to change trains. He was looking out to sea, and the only thing he had all day was a glass of orange juice. So he felt faint, and blow me down, he fainted into the sea, dressed as a French maid. Well, there's a fishing boat that's nearby, thank the Lord, and they row over to him, haul him in, and he comes to, and he says, "Oh, what on earth am I doing? I'm dressed as a French maid. I'm about to commit a triple murder and shoot myself all over this woman who doesn't love me." "Oh, let's forget it." And he went back home. I mean, it sounds like a bad episode of EastEnders. You couldn't make it up.
So
and this is the point. Classical music doesn't have to be stuffy. It can be enjoyable and fun.
Where can we find your TV show?
Classical Connections. Just Google it. Go to my website, which is robertemery.com, or just go to YouTube and search for Classical Connections. And there was one released yesterday, which was about Mozart. We drop a new episode every Friday, one per week for the next 14 weeks.
Robert, good to chat to you this morning. Thanks ever so much. There you go. Classical Connections on YouTube. Just have a look. And it's interesting, whilst Robert was talking about that and the fact of the Grieg and the TV advert, and the thought sprung to mind, any fan of The Apprentice and that theme tune, I'll leave it with you.